Well, I am thrilled to get to share with you who we're going to hear next. I have sat under many preachers, and I'm going to actually introduce you to my pastor right now, Brian LIGHTSEY, who is the lead pastor at Life Church in Leander. The Lord has given Brian such a gift at dissecting the Word and bringing it with a practical application for your life. And so I'm thrilled to introduce you to Pastor Brian LIGHTSEY.
In Luke 10:27, it says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." Jesus called this the first and greatest commandment. In fact, he said the second commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, he said, is also something that he said all the law and all the prophets hang on these two commandments. They're suspended from these commandments, like they're two hinges on a door, and they carry the weight of all the teachings of God. We love God and we love others. And I love that because we know what God's against. 8 of the 10 commandments say, "Thou shalt not." We know what he's against, but what's he for? He's for loving him with all of our faculties and loving our neighbor as ourselves. So we love God with everything that we are. We love him with our heart, and we're pretty good at believing Jesus with our heart. We love him with our soul. That's our aspirations. We're also pretty good at making commitments. And we're to love God with all of our strength, which is our action. And we're also fairly good at serving him. We struggle, though, sometimes, I believe, when it comes to loving God with all of our mind, with our attitude. We have this disconnect somehow. The world has told us that it's not important to use our mind. And yet the Apostle Paul says to the Romans, "Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Resist the tension of the world that says the mind is not important. Rather, allow God to renew your mind, and that is the key of transformation. And so I encourage you today to think about how God can use your mind as you live out your Christian life. Over and over again, the Bible talks about the importance of knowledge, understanding, wisdom. In the Old Testament, God speaks through a prophet Hosea and says, "My people are destroyed because of lack of knowledge." He speaks through Isaiah when he says that, "Come on, let us reason together. Let be with your mind." In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul talks to the Ephesians. He talks to the Philippians and the Colossians. He says things like this: "May your love abound more and more in knowledge and depth and insight." And so God wants us to use our mind with him. I think he tells us how to do that in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, when he says we're to take captive every single thought and make it obedient to Christ. And so today, how can you take captive your thoughts? Every single thought, to make it obedient to Christ. What is God calling you to do with your thoughts, with your mind? Maybe for some of you, if you're a student, you need to do your homework. Maybe if you didn't finish high school, it's time to get your GED. Or perhaps maybe you need to finish college, or enroll in college, or go for some higher education. How is God calling you to use your mind, take every thought captive, and actually love God with all your mind and raise the standard? Because whenever Christians love God with all their mind, when that happens, when we see that happening, we see them raising the standard and valuing education. In the 4th century, they loved God with all their mind, and they started schools. In the 12th century, they loved God with all their mind, and they raised the standard, and they start universities. In fact, 92% of the 138 first universities and colleges in America were started by Christ followers loving God with all their mind. When Christ followers in the 17th century loved God with all their mind, they raised the standard and they started a push for public education. So now we're in the 21st century, and now it's our turn. Now it's your turn. How are you going to love God with all of your mind? How are you going to take every thought captive? How can you let the Spirit of God transform you by the renewing of your mind? Today, the challenge for you is to listen to God's Spirit, whatever he's telling you to do, to raise a standard and not just love God with your heart and with your soul and your strength, but love God with all of your mind.